Hello guys, this is SC Slarage, and I'm going to show you how to solo the weekly Nightfall strike when it's Phogoth the Untamed, regardless of burn. The very first thing that you're going to want to set up is your faction item, because if you don't put on the right faction item, you're giving 500 rep away to the wrong faction. So I put on the Cloak of Repair before doing anything else. The next thing I want to do is set up weapons that are going to take advantage of the available burns for the week. This week is Solar and Void, so for that reason I'm going to be using a Solar Machine Gun, Solar Sniper Rifle, and a Void Primary Scout Rifle. I strongly recommend using anything that you can to take advantage of burns because it'll triple your damage, and that's definitely worth doing even if it's not a strong weapon otherwise. What I'm looking at here is my class setup. I turn on better control so that I don't turn off my camo if I decide to jump away from something, and then I turn on the flux grenade so that I can get the most damage on arc shields possible. Arc bolt is generally better, but in this situation particularly you're not fighting very many enemies with arc weaknesses, so I like to have the flux grenade on so that I can do the most damage against the fewest enemies. I pull up the burns there just to demonstrate that it is in fact Void and Solar burn. That's why I've got Void and Solar weapons on. In this case, an arc weapon is not going to be useful for a lot of the situation, but you'll notice that I do later switch to one because I have a good heavy and a good secondary and enough ammo for both of them that I can afford to use a primary just to take shields off. I'm going into the very first room of the strike right here. This is technically considered part of the strike, but it is not considered part of the darkness zone, and for that reason I'm allowed to be as careless as I want to be. I wouldn't recommend overdoing it though, because if you start being careless in this room, you're going to start being careless in the following rooms, and you might end your Nightfall prematurely. Once you walk around that corner, the Wizard and the Boomer Knight are going to start pre-firing like crazy, so you're going to have a really hard time getting around the corner without taking a lot of damage. For that reason, it's really good to have a weapon that's going to have high DPS, like a sniper rifle, machine gun, or a rocket launcher to kill the enemies there. The Wizard is the biggest target. After that, you're going to want to kill this Boomer Knight. And you can really go about this however you want, because again, you are allowed to die here, but I find that killing them in this order allows you to proceed the fastest. Once the Wizard's dead, the room is a lot safer to enter, and even though it is still dangerous, you can wander in. It may seem like this room isn't worth clearing out because it's not part of the darkness zone, but it turns out that it's really helpful to return to this room after activating the darkness zone in the next room. Once you open the door, or get your ghost active on it, it's going to turn the entire area into a darkness zone, which includes the room that we're in currently. So if you try to run back here for safety and die in it, you will have to restart the Nightfall, which is why it's good to clear it out beforehand when you're not in the darkness zone, so that you can return here without any threat of death. Tedious as it may be, clearing out this room makes the Nightfall a complete breeze, and so for that reason I'm going to suggest that you spend the time, as many times as you need to against this knight, and make it happen. I used my grenade a little bit early here, and I didn't feel like fighting him without a weapon that's going to do arc damage against his shield, so for that reason I just waited for my grenade to come back. Obviously I could just shoot him with my gun if I felt like it, but at the time I was just being silly. I'm really just kind of fooling around with him, more or less to demonstrate the fact that this room isn't threatening, and even if he had hit me a couple times and managed to kill me, it wouldn't have actually caused me any problems. I stopped before activating the door to use a heavy synth because I didn't get any heavy ammo in the room before this. I like to use a heavy synth right here specifically because if I had used one in the room before I might have gotten heavy drops and there would just be an excessive amount on the ground, but I feel like if I use it here and don't get any in the continued fight, then I'll have a synth available sooner and I won't have to spend as much time waiting. I think that using a synth is oftentimes worthwhile in this kind of situation because I would rather have my best guns available as often as possible. This is especially true for people who don't have a variety of different Void or Solar weapons available, or whatever burn is available for the week. If you're not going to be able to fight enemies with your primary or secondary weapon, you want to have a synth available for your heavy weapon as often as possible. So when I start this fight, I stand very near the entrance, because a bunch of Cursed Thralls are some of the first enemies they spawn in, and then there's a group of Thralls right before that as well. That's especially dangerous on an Arc Nightfall, because Thralls' melee attacks are arc damage and Cursed Thrall explosions are both arc. On this Nightfall, it's not as dangerous, so I'm a little bit more risky about the way I play, but I still don't push forward far. I don't think that's a good idea. I think that staying behind this wall is pretty much where you want to be for the majority of the Nightfall. I've switched to an arc primary weapon, which is something I said I was going to do a little bit earlier, because the knights with the arc shields are a lot more difficult to take out without an arc weapon, and I only have one grenade. I might have been safer using an arc bolt here, but I feel like switching to an arc primary is fine. I got behind the wall right there because I was taking a lot of damage over a little time. If you take a lot of damage over a lot of time, it's not that big of a deal, but if you go from full shield to no shield in a matter of a couple seconds, that means that the enemies have a really good chance of killing you if you stand still, and it's worth repositioning yourself. You want to be pretty attentive to how fast they're doing the damage that they do. After I've killed the two red knights, I start aiming at the yellow ones. The way that I've chosen to approach them is actually pretty significant. Killing the red ones reduces a lot of the damage offensively, the same amount that killing a yellow one would, so I like to focus on the red ones first because it gets the most damage off me the fastest. I went for the ammo at that point because I heard the audio cue telling me that the first wave of enemies was done. You don't actually have to kill all of the enemies for the next wave to start, so if you hear an audio cue, that means it's time to move on. And when I say audio cue, I mean that Dinklebot was telling me he's made some progress unlocking the door. I'm standing behind this wall right now because the enemies have a hard time shooting over it. I talked about that a moment ago, and for the most part, their shots won't hit you. If your shield gets really below that first third, you probably want to wait and recover most of it. I've done this a bunch of times, so I'm being a little bit more aggressive than I think it would be wise to be unless you've given it a couple tries yourself. You'll figure out the amount of damage that you can really afford to take the more you do this. I think a high-impact machine gun is actually a pretty good choice for this. It winds up becoming your primary to some extent because it can kill most enemies in one bullet, considering its high impact with a burn available to it. There are a couple machine guns that fit this archetype. I couldn't tell you the exact names of them, but Jolder's Hammer is actually available this week from Iron Banner. If you don't have one, this is a good opportunity to get one. It's good for PvE and PvP, so I think it's worth getting. One of the really nice things about using a machine gun like that is that the really low fire rate machine guns tend to have really high aim assist. Jolder's Hammer in particular, it's pretty hard to miss a headshot with it, to be honest. It will aim at their heads for you a lot more than other guns will, and it will also aim the bullets like curving them towards their head a bit more. So you wind up getting a lot of bang for your buck using that gun, and that's what makes it really powerful in PvP. After you've cleared out all of the enemies but these melee knights, you're going to have to push forwards and kill them. Be careful not to push too far forwards in case you haven't killed everything else, but you do need to push forward a little bit to make sure that they actually try to attack you, or at least reveal themselves so that you can get an attack on them. There's been a heavy ammo pack on the ground for a while now as well. I've been avoiding picking that up because I don't want to pick it up and completely fill out my reserve ammo and waste some of the potential ammo in the pack, but now that I've determined I'm not going to be able to push forward safely to pick up ammo for a little while again because it says the next rune has been decoded, it's time to pick up the ammo and make sure that I'm far back as possible. Essentially, you do not want to be picking up ammo while enemies are out, so if the wave is almost over, then that's the safest time to pick it up. If you're a hunter, you can use camo to pick it up. If you're a defender titan, then you always have your bubble to rely on. If you're a warlock, you always have your self-revive to rely on. A lot of times it's not going to be that dramatic to pick up ammo, but it's good to have something to fall back on in case you've missed an enemy or something like that. Again, I'm standing near the entrance when I'm killing most of these things, and I'm pushing up a little bit now because I know that in the third wave, a bunch of enemies like to stand on the very top level right above the entrance. When they stand up there, they will drop down like this knight just did. You just have to give them the opportunity to, so if you push up, make sure you pull back a little bit afterwards to see if you've lured any of the enemies out. It's worth noting that the arc version of this Nightfall is a lot more dangerous in a lot of areas, but here particularly there's a Boomer Knight standing above me. He can kill you in 2 shots or 1 shot if you're 1 level under, have low armor, or that sort of thing. For that reason, you really don't want to be anywhere near as aggressive fighting him as I am here. You're probably going to want to do something involving a defensive tactic like using camo, a bubble, or self-revive as I just mentioned before to deal with him, but that's only on an arc Nightfall. Considering that the burns right now are void and solar, I can afford to stand here and fire at him a little bit. You just need to be wary of the differences of different burns. The knight can be a bit of a pain to kill, I realize that, but pushing up to get him is really not worth it, especially on an arc Nightfall. You're going to want to have some sort of defensive measure available to you most of the time, or just spend as much time as necessary fighting him like I do in this video. I don't really think this is reasonable to do most of the time. If you have a higher impact sniper, you could probably one-shot him after his shield is taken off, or if you want to dedicate a lot more machine gun ammo to it, that's an option. Finally, a rocket will probably one-shot him if you manage to shoot it through that grating in front of me. If you're going to do that, make sure not to use tracking because it'll make it run right into the wall. Proximity detonation can also make it a little bit more difficult, but generally it's not that hard to do if you just take your time, make sure you're shooting through the cracks instead of into them, and eventually you'll kill him. This is where the wizards come out. The wizards are the biggest, baddest guys ever. If you're on an arc Nightfall, this is where 90% of wipes happen because people are pushed too far forwards. What you want to do is push back into the stairs like I am right now, and watch your radar. Eventually, he's on the very front of my radar. That means they're coming around the corner. I get ready to fire at him and then fire as much as I can. A lot of times you won't kill any of the wizards doing that, but you're going to want to walk forwards to bait them out and then pretty much repeat this process. Again, if you're doing something like this, make sure that you have camo available, self-revive available, defender bubble available, something to where if you get caught off guard, you can recover from it in some way. I'm pushing forwards here because I know my machine gun can handle them. If I was not more confident in my gun, I would definitely have took them like I took the first two wizards, which is to go to the middle of the stairs, wait till you see them on the front of your radar, and then go to the back of the stairs as they come around the corner. Basically, you need to go back into the room that we cleared out in the very beginning if they start looking even remotely threatening, and in an Arc Nightfall, that is immediately. In an Arc Nightfall, you don't even want to fight them from the stairwell, you want to go all the way back to the very beginning room, and that's where you're going to fight them from. Yes, they will take longer to kill that way, but if you're trying to speedrun a Nightfall solo, I don't really know if I have any great pointers for you. The room that I'm walking to right now seems innocuous enough, but it's actually a pretty threatening room as well. There are a couple Shredder Knights that are going to come from the left, there are a couple Thrall that are going to come that way, a Cursed Thrall as well, and then there's a Knight with a Boomer Gun and an Ogre in front of this door. This room is still considered part of the Darkness Zone, so the fact that the Ogre has a Void Eye Blast attack means that he's extremely dangerous. On an Arc Nightfall, I wouldn't have pushed up like that because those Arc Thrall melee attacks would have actually been quite dangerous. The Boomer Knight also tried to fire at me, and I got him just before he did. The moral of the story here is that the Ogre is the threat in a Void Nightfall, whereas everything is the threat in Arc Nightfall. You need to be a lot more slow about this if you're going to try and do it in an Arc Nightfall. The way I handle this next room is a lot riskier than I think that anybody who isn't comfortable soloing Nightfalls already should be. You can dash through the entire room without camo in order to get through it. It's perfectly safe to do because a lot of the enemies are supposed to come out as you walk through the room for dramatic effect, but the end result is that they wind up not firing at you if you get through it with your character's agility relatively high or even low. It's not really much of a threat because, as you see right here, they're coming out of the doors, not really firing at me. I activate camo just because I think that it's better to be safe than sorry if you're doing this sort of thing, but you could very easily do it without activating camo. It's really not a threat. It is part of the Darkness Zone. If you're not comfortable running through it, I highly advise you to actually stop and fight the enemies. These guys right here especially are dangerous on an Arc Nightfall, but they're very easy to run by. If you just dash right by them, even without camo, they won't hit you in time. I actually believe that running by the enemies is the safest strategy if you want to do this, but if you don't commit to it, then it will wind up being a lot more dangerous. If you are worried at all about getting through that area, fighting the enemies slowly is not a bad option. Just be sure that you commit one way or the other. When I walk into the room with the Phogoth fight, I immediately start hitting him with my heaviest DPS weapon because I want to activate the fight. This doesn't have to do with doing a lot of damage to him, it's mostly to get him off the chains and firing at me. Then I immediately run back into this room and crouch in this corner. The reason that I want to move this far back and get into this angle is partially to avoid Phogoth's fire and partially to avoid the spawning of Shriekers and Wizards in the room in front of me. You can get a better angle in there, but it'll spawn in extra enemies periodically and it makes it a lot more dangerous. Stand almost exactly where I do and you should be fine. Basically you want to be before the doorway. I also took off camo at this point because you want to keep Phogoth aggroed once you get his aggro. I spend a little while here struggling to get it, and once you do have it, you don't want to go camo and have him walk away. For that reason, it's good to turn off Stalker if you have it on here. If you're any other class, looks like you didn't have camo in the first place, so you're in shape. This is really a point where you shouldn't fail, to be honest. If you fail here, it's probably because you walked too far forwards and stayed in this room that I'm in right now for too long. You want to always be on this side of the doorway entering Phogoth's room until they patch this. If they do, this is the place to stand because the farther up you go, the more danger you're in. I walked forward here a little bit to try and clear out an ad that might stand in front of Phogoth's face. He's going to prevent me from damaging the boss at some point if I don't do that, and here I am hitting the boss at long last. I've pushed forwards a little bit farther than I would recommend anyone going. I've got a pretty good idea of where is safe to be and where is not safe to be as far as spawning in extra things. If I had pushed forwards just even the tiniest bit too far, a Shrieker would have spawned above my head and it would kill you in a shot or two, which is not a very long amount of time to react. For that reason, I would say better be safe than sorry once again. If you're shooting at Phogoth, he will generally stand and stare at you. The angle in front of the doorway works just as well for this. I would recommend doing that for anybody who hasn't done it before because the angle is only slightly narrower and it's a lot safer to do as far as not spawning the Shrieker above you. Again, if the Shrieker attacks, you probably won't have time to react to it before you die. In addition, Phogoth's attacks can be kind of dangerous. If he hits you, he will have only 2 or 3 hits in before he kills you. If you get hit 2 times, you probably ought to back up. You only get hit by him moving as far forward as I have. I don't think that it's really worth pushing this far forward, once again, but if you do push this far forward, be careful to back up. It's worth losing his aggro to save your life. Another thing worth mentioning is that if you are in an arc version of this Nightfall, the Boomer Knights that spawn in front of you are a heck of a lot more dangerous. The blue explosions in front of me, they will occasionally notice you as far back as I am, and they come farther into the room sometimes. If they hit you twice, they will kill you. If a Boomer Knight seems even remotely dangerous, I would recommend backing out of the room, standing still for a little while, waiting for the Boomer to lose aggro, and then walking forwards again. If you see one of them causing problems, think about using an arc rocket launcher to kill them from a safe distance. Something I feel is worth mentioning is that while this does seem like a bit of a cheesy method, pretty much anything that you do involving a solo Nightfall is going to involve some sort of safe spot, because there's just no way that you can take all of the damage from all of the enemies while they have 3 times as much damage from burn modifiers, and realistically damage the boss without doing something to keep yourself safe. In this case, with the amount of damage they're doing, keeping yourself safe means taking no damage at all, and that means the use of a safe spot. So yes, it is a bit cheesy, but there's really nothing you can do about it while playing solo. I think in general, people will do these same sort of strategies while playing with a team, and it pretty much does the exact same thing, but just a little bit faster. The way that Nightfalls are set up currently, they just do too much damage for you to realistically fight them without doing something involving a safe spot. I backed up from Phogoth right there because my health bar went into the red. Red generally means get away from the enemy, because if he was to hit me 2 times back to back with his Eye Blast attack, chances are it would have finished me off, and there's really no reason to risk it when I would have to do the whole 20-minute Nightfall over again if I did manage to die in that situation. But if I lose his aggro by backing up to try and get health back, it's just going to set me back maybe a minute at most. It's really not worth risking anything in a situation like this, even if the boss looks like he's almost dead. I don't actually have enough bullets to finish off Phogoth in this situation, so what I do in the video is make a bad call and use a synthesis while he's looking right at me. This is the kind of thing that gets you killed, and it's really not worth doing, but in the video it turned out to work out for me. If you've killed a couple enemies, you'll automatically pick up the ammo that they've dropped from a distance if you leave yourself completely ammo-less for about a minute and a half. It takes a while, but it's worth waiting for it if you don't have any synthesis available to you. If you do have synthesis, you should not do what I did. You should get out of danger, then use the synthesis, then come back. That's pretty much it for the Phogoth Nightfall, I think. My reward was a legendary special engram, but I did not get a chance to open it because, for whatever reason, I got weaseled as I went to Rahul and was talking to him. Unfortunate for me. Well, hope you've enjoyed the guide. If you want more like this, let me know. Thanks for watching, bub.